When it comes to public school education in Maryland, we are facing more than just a few challenges. Less than 40% of high school graduates are assessed as college and career ready. And Maryland has a shortage of high-quality teachers and principals. The good news is there are bold new recommendations at hand that would remedy Maryland's beleaguered education system. Grab your pen and paper for a lesson on improving education in Maryland.
Hey guys, how are you today?
Good.
I'm here to talk about how with technology you can make amazing worlds. Come with me. My team and I bring the Halo world to life.
Is that you?
That is me. I wasn't a math genius and I knew nothing about coding. But you guys do. You guys have the power to change things.
I want your job.
I want you to have my job.
Hello and welcome to the Clarion Call TV show. I'm Janice Hatcher-Liggins, your host. We have all heard that our public schools are struggling. Social promotion, teaching to the test, and underfunding has crippled our school system. Fortunately, as we speak, efforts are underway in Annapolis through the Kirwan Commission with bold new policies and practices to turn Maryland education around. Joining us today to bring insight into the recommendations of the Kirwan Commission is Dr. David Hornbeck, co-founder of Strong Schools Maryland. Dr. Hornbeck is a former Maryland State Superintendent of Schools and former Superintendent of the School District of Philadelphia. Also with us is Dr. Alvin Thornton, Chair of the Prince George's County Board of Education for the second time. Dr. Thornton is a former Political Science Department Chair, Associate Provost, and Senior Advisor to the President of Howard University. Importantly, Dr. Thornton chaired the 2002 Thornton Commission. Gentlemen, I appreciate you joining me here on set. I am so excited about this topic and what all is going on, and I'm looking forward to sharing with our viewers what that's all about. So we're going to start off with the 2002 Thornton Commission. Tell us what that was about. It's your namesake, so obviously you chaired it. I did. Tell us a little bit about what that was about.
Actually, it's my fourth time chairing the school board here in Prince George's County, so I wanted to correct
your fourth time?
My fourth
I'm so
time.
Sorry.
That's okay. It's a labor of love. A labor of love. This is. I left the board in 1999 at the request of the then Governor Paris Glendening to chair the Thornton Commission. This is a 27-member citizens commission appointed by the governor and the leadership of the General Assembly. And we worked for 2 years, largely in response to the divisive, regional, partisan, racial division that existed previous to the commission. In Prince George's, it was Vaughn's versus the Prince George's Board of Education. In Baltimore's Bradford, just very divisive. And I think the state was looking for a way to attach adequacy of funding and equity to its expected student performance test-based. And our commission was charged to work, and we worked for 2 years to do that. It became known as the Thornton Commission, but it was the Commission on Adequacy, Equity, and Excellence. The legislation that came from it became known as the Bridge to Excellence, which is the official name. It was one of the most rewarding experiences that I've had in my life.
What was the ultimate impact of that?
The impact was to say to the state of Maryland and the people of Maryland, if you want the performance that you're saying you want from your children, you have to fund it at this level. And in order to do that, you must make sure that funding is equitable and addresses basic needs of children as they come to us. They come to us from different levels of economic status, poverty. They come to us with different immigrant language capacities, and they come to us with different disabilities, et cetera. And so the main thing that came out of it for me was to build at least a consensus, an operating consensus about what we wanted for our children that was significantly depoliticized And I think it helped us for a significant period of time.
Okay, wonderful. So, Dr. Hornbeck, there's also the Kirwan Commission. And you're not chairing that at all,
no.
But you are a strong advocate of it. Tell us about the Kirwan Commission and what it is all about.
Well, the Kirwan Commission, named after Britt Kirwan, former Chancellor of the University of Maryland, in the same way that the Thornton Commission was named after Dr. Thornton, actually emerges directly from a recommendation that the Thornton Commission had made in 2002, and that is, in 10 years, let's take a look at this. Let's see how we're doing. Well, unfortunately, that would have been 2012, and we didn't quite meet that timetable.
Okay.
But the General Assembly and the governor finally got around to it in 2016 and appointed this commission, and it had two charges. One was to review the adequacy and equity of the funding formula in exactly the same way, in a sense, that the Thornton Commission had, and the other one was to make recommendations of policy changes that would be necessary in order to establish a world-class education, is the way that they framed that. And so it came into existence. I think the first meeting was in December of 2016.
Okay. So were students faring any better or worse between 2002 and 16?
Well, the record is that from 2002 till about 2008, you began to see this steady improvement in student performance, and that was during a period of time that, in fact, the General Assembly and the governor put the money in that the Thornton Commission had recommended. In 2008, the governor and the General Assembly, in effect, decided to put a cap on that, and that has, for example, resulted now in the underfunding of education across the state to the tune of about $2.9 billion. So
Underfunding.
Underfunded. If we had done what Dr. Thornton said to do 17 years ago and carried it forward, school districts would have $2.9 billion more
Per year.
And significantly, Prince George's County is the single most underfunded school system in the state, with over $500 million of underfunded. The city is the second most underfunded at $290 million, and then it's spread out. In fact, 20 of the 24 school districts in the state are underfunded when you measure it against what the Thornton Commission defined as adequate and equitable.
My goodness. So how has that affected student performance in Maryland?
Since 2008, when the governor and the General Assembly put a cap on it, it has not fared well. A couple of examples. If you look in the United States at the National Assessment of Education Progress, which is sort of the gold standard of assessment, we are in the middle. We're, depending on whether it's reading or math and fourth grade or the eighth grade, we're 29th or 31st or 27th. So you'd have to characterize that as mediocre. And then we look at the issue in an international or global context, because that's the name of the game in 2019. And if you look at the assessment of 15-year-olds among 70 countries around the world, the United States is in the middle.
Wow.
And so we are mediocre, in effect, in a mediocre country on a global stage. Now, I've got to add there, because people don't understand this. That's true, but a woman named Linda Darling Hammond took a look at it in terms of income. And if you look at the 10% wealthiest kids in this country and across the world, the United States is number one in the world. If you look at the 25% wealthiest kids, compare it to the same kids in other countries, we're still the third best country in terms of performance. It's only when you crank in the kids who are faced with the challenges of poverty that the numbers change significantly.
And so the likelihood is also with the wealthy kids that they're not in public schools.
Lots of them are not in public schools. Lots of them are in underfunded schools. The performance and opportunity tracks income, it tracks race, it tracks the language, the first language of kids. So all of those things come to play. For example, in Maryland, I said that 20 of 24 systems are underfunded. In Maryland, 53% of black kids in the state go to school in an underfunded district, and only 8% of white kids go to school in an underfunded district, and that plays itself out.
And what you have to do is the language is very important, because we can talk about differences in performance and differences in terms of funding, but we have to talk about this constitutionally. And so we start with Article 8 of the Constitution. See, there are certain things constitutionally are impermissible, regardless of the politics. Otherwise, we would never have had Brown versus Board of Education. And we would not have had Maryland's most favorite son, Thurgood Marshall. So Marshall would say to us, let's go into Article 8 and look at the requirements for an adequately funded education provided by the state, not by a county, and with an equal protection provision for all kids that is not zip code or county specific. See, we divide our kids into counties, and then we measure performance, and then we hold them accountable within that county, which is really just surrogate for zip code. That's all it is. Right. And with Baltimore and Prince George's County, for black people, it's a surrogate for race, and for the eastern counties, Somerset and Allegheny, it's a surrogate for low-income whites. And
it's interesting that the underfunding of schools in Maryland is very pronounced in Prince George's County and Baltimore City, which are majority black.
But it's also underfunded in areas where low-income white people live. My point I'm making is that it is, and I think that's one of the things that drove Thornton in 1919 when it was appointed, was the legal mandate that the state was under. See, there is, right now in Baltimore City, ACLU, NAACP, and others are saying to the state, as they said to Paris Glendenning, our governor back then, look, you have a legal obligation to do this. If you don't have the right politically not to do it.
Wonderful.
Okay. So wonderful. the people now, and when I grew up, people talked about Brown versus Board of Education, the 14th Amendment, Equal Protection Clause. That was, everybody talks about that. In Maryland, we have to talk about Article 8, the equal rights provision of the Maryland Constitution. It has to have the same power.
Wonderful. Good for you. So what is the goal of the Kirwan Commission?
Writ large, a world-class education. We've translated that, in a sense, into a school system in which basically all kids have the opportunities that result in their being able to go to college without the need for remediation and or to get a job that pays enough to support a family and is personally satisfying, and 3, to function effectively as a citizen. And that's not going to take little teeny changes, it's going to take big changes.
One of the things that I would say about that is, which I don't see the language in Kirwan, is restorative justice. See, Maryland is not just trying to create a world-class citizen, it's a school system. It is also trying to create a system that restores children from the harm that they received. Wonderful. That is very important. That is a cultural dimension, that's a psychological dimension, and that should always be there, because children were hurt. See, underfunding creates not only inequality in terms of education funding, but it also creates inequality in terms of developmental opportunities. Wonderful. And it is race and class specific.
Wonderful. Let's hold it right there. We're going to take a quick break. With all that is going on in Annapolis to get the Kirwan Commission recommendations enacted, we still need your help. What can you do? Glad you asked. That's next.
opiates has taken everything and everyone I've ever loved away from me. Everything. All I did was dance. I was being scouted for a scholarship. I blew my ankle out and I got prescribed pain pills by my doctor. If making my detox public is gonna help somebody, I'm all for it. Is there any medicine that I can have right now? I'm cold sweating really bad. I just wish I would have had a warning.
Opioid dependence can happen after just 5 days. Know the truth, spread the truth.
Welcome back. Strong Schools Maryland is leading the statewide grassroots campaign in Maryland to create a world-class education system for every student, especially those who are disproportionately affected by policies because of race, poverty, language, and disability. So we're going to get right back into our conversation. First, I want to make sure we touch on those 5 policy areas in the Kirwan Commission. So can you just, for example, early childhood education. Quick, what is that about?
The major thrust of it is that over the 10-year period, every low-income child in Maryland, ages 3 and 4, would have a seat in a preschool program, and every 4-year-old would, regardless of income. So it's an important recognition that what happens in those first 5 years of life connects to graduation all those years later.
Very good. And the second one is high quality and diverse teachers and leaders. What's that about?
Teaching, what happens in the classroom is really important, and so the Commission has recommended some big changes on that front, ranging from pay changes, career ladders, so you don't have to leave the classroom in order to send your own kid to college for compensation reasons, higher standards for teachers, things like that, because we've got to raise the profession of teaching to one of the most esteemed professions in the state.
That was the pre-K was a recommendation of Thornton, universal pre-K, but it was not funded. So this is a legacy gap that we have there. For example, in Prince George's County, only 39% of the kids are reading ready when they enter the school. So you have to get them before they get to the school.
Right. And the next one is college and career readiness.
That goes back to being ready for one or the other by the time you graduate. The new recommendations would result in that determination by the end of the 10th grade, so that as it is implemented in a phased-in way, kids in the 11th and 12th grade would accentuate their readiness either for going into the workforce or going on to advanced education. So it again is an effort to bring Maryland students to a global level of performance.
And we have to make sure we don't racialize that, because when you hear that debate in our community, black community, they say, well, you have too many kids going to college. And we have very few engineers, very few physicists, PhDs at my level are not being reproduced. So they're not mutually exclusive. You do both. You see, that discussion in our community sometimes says it's either or. And it's not either or.
Well, the graduation rate, those who are college and career ready right now in the county, I know the local community college has set up a completely new and separate curriculum for students coming out of the schools who are not ready. And it's booming with so many kids
And that's one of the things that the Kirwan Commission is trying to change. You ought not to go to college to be remediated.
That's right.
That ought to have been taken care of
while you were in high school.
While you were in high school.
I agree 100%.
But we have to make sure now, because there are kids like me who came out of training schools who were remediated by the historically black colleges, the great historically black colleges. So we didn't use remediation as a barrier to college access. We have to be very sophisticated about this.
Yes, it's true, but I think it still should happen. High schools should do what they're there to do.
And if they don't do what they're supposed to do, we still need to maintain access to higher education.
Right.
That's all I'm saying.
And they should get
absolutely
punished.
Right.
Accountability is key.
We must do both.
Which is another one of the 5 areas is governance and accountability. And tell us about that one.
Well, I think that lots of citizens would be ready to put the resources in if they were confident that the outcomes were going to be achieved of the kind that we've been talking about. And so there is a strong accountability provision, but one of the important things of that is that it's what the Commission tended to call reciprocal accountability. That is to say, you don't just hold kids and teachers and superintendents and school boards accountable, you hold the General Assembly accountable for providing the resources that are necessary for that to happen. And so what's in process here is going to end up, if we are all successful, in a grand bargain. It's resources on the one hand, and on the other hand, accountability for outcomes. But one without the other is not going to work.
Yes. There's one more that I want to make sure we don't overlook,
No.
and that's the one with more resources to ensure success for all students. What's that
It's hugely important, and it's part of the grand bargain piece of this, and it goes back to the underfunding of school districts and the lack of equity, the lack of adequacy, and the Commission has come at that in 2 ways. There is a very large pot of money that has been recommended that would go out to schools based not just on the numbers of low-income kids in a school, but something that is new, and I think the only time in the history of the United States, if it passed, that it would pass, and it revolves around concentrated poverty. The notion that it's bad enough to be a poor, low-income student in a school, but if you have 55% or more is the number that the Commission chose of students aggregated, that the negative impact of that is exponential rather than just a little bit more. And so the Commission has recommended that there be a basic formula, a poverty-driven formula, and a concentrated poverty-driven formula. And then in addition to that, they've recommended a very strong emphasis on wraparound services, recognizing that it's not just the 2 covers of a book and the 4 walls of the classroom that make these things happen. It's also derivative of housing and food deserts and eye care and hearing care and things. So every school with 55% or more of the kids meeting poverty standards would be a community school and would get a staff member focused on those poverty-driven things and a second full-time person who is a health professional.
And that's where the rubber hits the road, see, because if that is a state paradigm, it's going to have to override political considerations, because children in the situation that Dr. Hornbeck just describes, they are particularly located in specific places in this state. And so if you're going to drive resources based upon that paradigm, it's going to drive more resources to certain places. That's the tough political decisions that politicians have to make. And sometimes they have to be encouraged to do that.
So I understand that there's the price tag on the Kirwan recommendations is a little more than what some people might like or expect. $3.8 billion is what I understand. And
The price tag is $3.8 billion, and if you focus on $3.8 billion, all of us make a little less than that, and so it sounds like a lot of money. But if you break it down, this is phased in over a 10-year period, and the $3.8 billion is the amount 10 years out, and that really represents only a 2.5% increase annually on average. And I guess I go back to what I guess has found its way to bumper stickers now that says, if you think education is expensive, try ignorance.
Yes, true.
Maybe we should call it a wall and just spend $8 billion on it. I'm kidding. I'm sorry.
Well, the other interesting thing back in the news now is that the state seemed to have, I think it was $6 billion to promise Amazon in order to get them to come here. Amazon decided not to come here and to go to these other places. They said because of a differential in talent, which translates to education. So there must be $6 billion out there someplace.
17 years ago, it was $1.3 billion, and we thought that was a lot of money. But we did it.
So tell us about Strong Schools Maryland.
Well,
you're a strong advocate of the Kirwan Commission. Why, and what is Strong Schools Maryland?
Well, we're strong advocates of Kirwan as it has unfolded. In the beginning, we were in favor of the Kirwan Commission doing what the Kirwan Commission ultimately did. It could have not done as good a job as I think, in fact, they did. But we think this won't become reality unless there's a strong grassroots effort to that end. And our basic organizing tool is something that we refer to as Teams of 10. And I'm thrilled that the Clarion Call has one of those teams of 10, and hope that many more Prince George's County people become part of the Clarion Call's Team of 10. But it meets monthly. It writes letters. Right now there is a Team of 10 in Annapolis every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday mornings, visiting in legislative offices. Encourage them, as Dr. Thornton suggested, to do the right thing in this context. And so that's our purpose. And we have now 181 of these teams in 19 of the 24 subdivisions in Maryland.
That's what people don't realize. In 2002, we dropped Thornton in December of 2001. There was a $400 million deficit at the time. It was raining and snowing, and no one thought Thornton was going anywhere. The people mobilized. We occupied Annapolis in the same way that Dr. Hornbeck is talking about. And we're going to have to do that again to support Kirwan.
Well, I am happy to have the Clarion Call serve as one of those teams of 10, because I too am 100% behind seeing our Maryland schools become stronger. World class is excellent. It's so we're going to do what we can do. Let me ask you this: do you need any more teams? Do you need people to get involved?
We need more teams, absolutely. And if people are interested in exploring what that means, I think you have my email address, and I invite people to be in touch. And everything is done for the team, so that the team leader only has to get a group
just
together.
Plug and play.
Plug and play.
And on March 11th, we're going to have a 1963-like March on Annapolis.
March on Annapolis.
To support Kirwan.
March 11th, March on Annapolis. Excellent, excellent. Great. Thank you both. Thank
Enjoyed
you
it.
both.
Our pleasure.
Yes,
Enjoyed
it's
it.
been wonderful. Hopefully enlightening to the viewers, and we're going to talk a little bit more about how people can get involved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Every voice matters. Every letter matters. Every student matters. Every teacher matters. If you are watching this show and you live in Maryland, we need your help to get it done. The Clarion Call is a team leader in the Strong Schools Maryland grassroots campaign, and we need you to get involved with our team to write letters and visit legislators in Annapolis. The Clarion Call will host a letter writing campaign soon, so join us and let your voice be heard. Please call or email us for the date and location. In Prince George's County, please contact the Clarion Call at connect@theclarioncall.info. along with our phone number, 301-464-7305. Outside of Prince George's County, please contact Dr. Hornbeck, Strong Schools, Maryland, at dhornbeck1@gmail.com. That's it for now, and we hope you enjoyed the show. Join us next time, won't you, for the Clarion Call. Until then, I'm Janice Liggins. Blessings to you.